Have you ever been compelled to do something? You saw something on TV, you saw something firsthand, or you heard about something. Have you ever been compelled to do something? What you saw, what you heard, laid so heavy on your heart that you had to do something. Maybe it was a person in need, someone who was homeless, someone who needed something to eat, someone who did not have a place to stay. Maybe it was that type of person, or maybe it was an injustice somewhere, or maybe it was something that needed to be fixed or repaired, but you saw something, but whatever it was, it laid heavy on your heart. You had empathy or sympathy for that person or for that place. Now the next question is, how far would you go to do something about it? What if it would cost you your job, your position, your livelihood? It can even cost you your life, your reputation. Would you let that compulsion, that compelling force in your heart, that heavy burden in your heart, would it lead you to take risk and risk it all to help that individual, to help those group of people? Today we're going to find out about a man who had that God laid on his heart. He heard something. It compelled him to do something. And he was willing to risk it all to help out the nation of Israel. Today, we're going to meet Nehemiah. Stay tuned for this week's lesson. Hello, welcome to this week's Sunday School lesson for April 18, 2021. The title of our lesson is The Restoring Builder. The Restoring Builder. It will come out of Nehemiah, the second chapter. It will cover verses 11 through 20. We'll cover the introductory verses before that to get context, but the passage of the lesson is verses 11 through 20, second chapter of the book of Nehemiah. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends about this Sunday School lesson. I would love for this lesson to reach as many people as possible. And guess what? I need your help. I can't do it by yourself. I only have so many friends, but you have many. So help me out. Thank you so much. So let's get into our lesson. This is a great lesson. Nehemiah is one of my favorite books because it talks about leadership. It talks about a godly leadership, someone who leads well, but behind all that leadership is that person's faith in God, and that's Nehemiah. Nehemiah is, many scholars say, it's a continuation of the book of Ezra, the book that we studied last week, and it's an overlap. Ezra and Nehemiah were contemporaries. By the time we are in the setting of Nehemiah, which is about 444 BC, Ezra has already been in Jerusalem for 13 years. So there's a 13-year gap between when Ezra is on the scene and then Nehemiah shows up. A 13-year gap, but they're contemporaries. And so, but you don't hear about either one of them in their particular books, but they're contemporaries. So what's going on? Okay, I talked about this last week. There was an exile. You had Israel was taken to exile by the Babylonians, the Judah, Benjamin, those two tribes. The other 10 had been destroyed by Assyria. And so after 70 years, the King Cyrus of Persia had a decree where the people of Israel, all who wanted to go, would go back to the motherland, which was Jerusalem. So on the first decree, which was 538 BC, about 50,000 Israelites, people from the nation of Israel, Jews, went back to the homeland. That was a remnant. Probably more stayed in Persia than went back. Why didn't they want to go back? Because it was destroyed. It was torn up from the floor. It was nothing to go back to. It would be instant poverty. That's why many did not go back, but the ones that did went back for the love of their country. And so that was the first wave, 538 BC. The second wave was 458 BC. That was under Ezra. And we talked about the first 6 chapters talks about the exile, people leaving leaving Persia and coming to Jerusalem. And then where we at now, 444 BC, that's the third exile, going from Persia to Jerusalem under the leadership of Nehemiah. So we're in the third exile. So that's where we're at. That's the setting. So we're in Nehemiah. Let me tell you what prompted this exile. Let me tell you what prompted. We go to chapter 1. It gives us a lot of history. Nehemiah he's not a priest. He's not a prophet. Nehemiah, as far as religious society goes, is a lay person. But he's a lay person with status. He's a Jewish person that's a cupbearer to the king of Persia, Artaxerxes. And so that's a position of honor. That's a position of trust. So something happened, whereas as a Jewish boy, he rose to a very high position. The cupbearer usually had great influence upon the king. He had the king's ear. So Nehemiah was a trusted servant who the king often listened to or talked to or vented to or shared things with and sought his opinion. So that's what we have Nehemiah as a trusted individual. And what it tells us is that even though you may be in a godless society or a godless company or a godless place of work, wherever you may be, you can and God does expect you to excel and still represent him. We'll find out that Nehemiah never did compromise his faith. He let his good work speak for him. So if you find yourself in that position, a godless company or a godless place of work or a godless environment, godless family or whatever it is, let your light shine. Let the love of Jesus come out of you, and God would honor that, and you'll see what all he can do in your life. So here, we look at chapter 1. That gives us a little bit of setting here. Nehemiah is in Persia, and the Bible says that his brother came to him and told him the condition of the place of Jerusalem. He told him that Israel did not have a wall around it, or whatever wall they had left was tore up, it was burned, it was garbage, it was rubbish. It talked about how Jerusalem was exposed to dangers. He told them how the other nations surrounding them, they had fortified walls. And he talked about the pitiful condition that Jerusalem was in, not having a wall. A wall meant a lot back then. It meant security. In this case, it represented the God that they served. It was saying that the God that you serve doesn't care about you. The God that you serve is weak. And then there was enemies around them that wanted to keep them that way. So Nehemiah's brother came, and his name is Hananiah, and some men from Judah came with them, and they said that the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Well, how did that happen? Well, when Babylon came, the Babylonians came, they took down Solomon's temple, they tore down the wall, they destroyed that place. They destroyed it so bad that people who remained there lived in poverty. They could not grow anything. They could not build anything. They burnt that city down completely and left it in rubbles. And that's the condition that it's been in. The remnant that came back under King Cyrus, they came back in 538 BC. They didn't have the funds to do that. They didn't do anything. The exiles that came with Ezra, the Bible tells us in Ezra 4:17, they say tried to do something, but the naysayers got to the king. From the naysayers, we'll find out who they are. They got to the Sanballat and Tobias and Gershom, got to the king's ear, and Artaxerxes, the same king that Nehemiah is working as a cupbearer for, and persuaded him then not to let them rebuild the gates around Jerusalem. Why? He said that they're going to be independent. They're going to want to rebel. They want to do all that. And the king listened to him, and that rebuilding of the gates under Ezra stopped completely. And so Nehemiah now hears from his brother, and he's saddened by it. How do we know what's sad about it? Because in the first chapter it says, as soon as he heard these words, he sat down and wept and mourned for days. And after this passage here, verse 4, there's a long prayer that he gives to God. So he prayed and he prayed and he prayed because it grieved him so much. It was so heavy on his heart that his mother country was in shambles, was being put to shame, and he wanted to do something about it. Now, he probably had never been there, obviously, because he would have seen it. He was probably born during the exile or born after the exile. So he didn't know what was going on, but he heard, and it troubled him. He still loved his nation. He still was loyal. And so now he has to decide, how do I get this fixed? What do I do about it? So he prays and prays, and God lays on his heart to do something about it. Okay? And then it says he prays for success. He says, give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. So he knows he's going to have to talk to the king of Persia, and he's nervous because you got to be careful how you approach a king. You got to be careful what you ask for. It can be looked upon as disloyalty. The king may not like it. You may be put in jail. You may be put to death. You may lose your position. And you got to remember, Nehemiah is living pretty large. Okay, he's living large. He's a cupbearer, so he's eating the best food, hanging around the best people, living in the best place. So, but yet he's willing to put that aside to go help his people. So he asks God for mercy and grace inside of this man. He asks this man for success. Now we get to chapter 2. 4 months have gone by because in chapter 1, the month is around April. Okay, and then when we get to chapter 2, it says the month of Nisan, which is November, December, which is wintertime. So about maybe 4 or 5 months or so has passed by, and then this is the setting today. And Nisan, the month of Nisan in chapter 2, that was the first month of the Persian calendar. So it says here, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, he's a cupbearer, he served him wine. And let me ask you this, during this maybe 4 or 5 months or maybe even longer, what do you think Nehemiah was doing? He heard chapter 1, he hears the bad news. Chapter 2, a considerable amount of time has passed. What do you think he was doing? He was praying to God. God was revealing to him a plan of action or a way or method to approach the king. That's what he was. So when we come here, he's prayed up. He has a plan laid out on how he's going to map this out to get the king to grant him permission to go and rebuild those gates around Jerusalem, that wall. And now he's going to put it into action. This is not by accident. This is not by happenstance. This was all planned out under the sovereignty and grace and wisdom of God. Let's see how it folds out. Because God is working both hands. He's giving Nehemiah wisdom. He's also softening the heart of the king of Persia. Because you remember in Ezra 4, he said, no, no way. And then we're going to come here and he's going to change his mind. Well, what caused him to change his mind? The grace of God. The grace of God. The month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up wine and gave it to the king. He's doing his custom duties, okay? Now, I had not been sad in his presence. When you're a cupbearer, or anybody, in that matter of fact, you don't come to the king sad. You put your best face on. Because if you come to the king sad, he may replace you. He may not like it. He may be offended. He may take you away. You don't know what could happen if you come to the king in the wrong manner. Okay? Look what he says. I had not been sad in his presence. Nobody, no king wants sad people around him. The king has enough pressure and burdens. He doesn't want anything added to his plate. Okay? So, but this is different. This is part of the plan. Please listen, okay? Now I had been sad, and now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, why is your face sad? So Nehemiah intentionally comes to him with a sad and gloomy face. You got to remember, the past 4 or 5 months, 3 or 4 months, or whatever, how long it was, he came to him without a sad face. So he was able to hold back his emotions, hold back his feelings, deal with the issue that he was going with, the drama that he saw, the bad report that he got. He was able to do it. But on this particular day, he decides to show his sad face. He does it so he can win the sympathy of the king, and that the king may inquire why his face is so sad, because he has never seen it before. The king liked Nehemiah. He trusted him. He loved him. He was fond of him. We'll see it later, because when he goes to Jerusalem, one thing he wants to know is, when you coming back? When you coming back? Okay, so why is your face sad, seeing that you're not sick? I look at you, you're not sick, you're well. Something's wrong with you, okay? This is nothing but sadness of the heart. The king is able to discern that something is troubling him. Something has made Nehemiah sad. It says, then Nehemiah said, then I was much afraid. He was much afraid because he didn't know if the king would take it the wrong way. He wasn't sure how the king would react. He knew the king had power. He knew that he wasn't supposed to come to the king with a sad face. Even though this is intentional, he's still afraid of what could happen here. Okay? Maybe he'll read through after I say what I have to say, he'll read through my plan. He'll read through what I really want. Or maybe after I say is that maybe he'll say that I'm disloyal. So it's a tense situation. Even though it's a plan, even though God is with him, it's still nervous to go before a king, especially in that day and time. You don't know what could happen to you. And he says, I said to the king, let the king live forever. That's a formula for addressing the king, but it's also a sign of loyalty. So the first thing Nehemiah does, he responds to that. Let the king live forever. King, I'm loyal to you. That's a customary formula in addressing the king that displays loyalty. So he says that on purpose to try to ease the tension a little bit. You got to remember, when you do things, or you go before the king or boss or wherever you're going to go through, wisdom plays a role. You just can't come to him any kind of way. You can pray all you want, which is good, but you need to be praying for wisdom and how to approach that, okay? That situation. You still have to approach it the right way, and God will give you that wisdom. So he says, let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad? He tells him why I'm sad. When the city of the place of my father's graves lie in ruins. My place that my ancestors lived is tore up, and his gates have been destroyed by fire. Then the king said to me, what are you requesting? So I prayed to the God of heaven. Before he spoke, he prayed so God would give him the right words, and also allow the king to receive what he had to say. Okay, this is a tense situation. They never had this conversation before. He doesn't know how the king's going to react, so he's praying for wisdom for the right set of words. And we need to do that too when we're asking for something, or when we're about to say something that's important. Even when we're angry, we need to ask God for the right words to say. So I pray to the God of heaven. That's what we need to do. Pray to the God of heaven. Now look what he says. Pray to the God of heaven. Okay? He's acknowledging, he says, so I prayed to the God of heaven. As he's writing this, he's acknowledged that he didn't pray to the Persian king. He didn't pray to the king himself. He prayed to the God of Israel, where his strength is, where his power is, where his wisdom lies. And then he said, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, he humbles himself. If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, this if means yes. Okay, hopefully this does please the king, and I'm sure I've found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's grave, that I may rebuild it. He gets it out, takes a deep breath, trusts God, and says it. I want to rebuild the gates around my city. And the king said to me, with the queen sitting beside him. I often wonder, what does it mean to have the queen sitting beside him? Well, maybe, one theologian said, maybe the queen was fond of Nehemiah. She enjoyed him being a cupbearer. Maybe she saw that he was a faithful servant. And maybe she kind of nudged the king a little bit and said, give him what he wants, give him what he wants. Something there, but she had some kind of influence or something on the king to help him make this decision. Then the king says, how long will you be gone? And when you return? Because this is a good cupbearer. This is a valuable employee that I want to keep. I'll let you go for a little while, but I can't let you stay. You're that valuable to me. That's what your employer should say about you too, you and me. So it pleased the king to send me. And when I had given him a time, really Nehemiah is going to stay for at least 12 or 13 years. He's going to take maybe the first year to rebuild the gates around Jerusalem, and then he's going to serve 12 years as governor of Judah. of Israel. Okay. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let the letters be given to me. Look, he had this planned out. When you're going before somebody and you want something, you're asking for a job, you're interviewing for a job, you're asking for a promotion, you're asking for somebody to help you, you're asking for somebody to make a donation to your cause, you're asking for somebody to help you, when you're trying to rally the troops, you got to have your plan laid out. So the plan so far is the sad face draws attention of the king. That opens up an opportunity for him to ask what he needs. And then when he gets an affirmative, he tells them, I need you to help me work this out. If it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river. To all those nations that are under your jurisdiction, give me a letter saying they are not to touch me, they are not to get in my way, they are not to harm me. Had that planned out. God gave him wisdom. And that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, that's a Jewish person, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gate for the fortress of the temple. All planned out, all laid out. And because he don't know if he's going to have another opportunity to go before the king, or when he's before the king, he wants to ask him this one time and not come back to him again. And for the wall of the city and for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I asked. Look, king granted. Who does he give glory to? It doesn't say the king found favor in me. He says, for the good hand of my God was upon me. The good hand of when anything happens to you, get that promotion, when you get that favor of some sort, somebody donates to your cause, somebody helps you, or something good happens to you, it's because of the good hand of God, especially if you prayed, especially if you're trusting God. Especially if God has given you the wisdom to ask and to carry it out, how to write a letter, how to present it. The good hand of God, especially doing it for the right motives. The good hand of God was with him. Verse 9, we're getting to our passage soon, but this background you've got to know to understand it. Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river. Okay, all these little nations or little territories or provinces like he's talking about. He gave them the letter. And the king sent with him. Now the king has sent with me officers and armies and horsemen. Look what he did. We don't have any knowledge of Nehemiah asking for an army or officers or horsemen. But look what the king, God had softened this king's heart to give him all that, to make sure he got there and got there safely. But when Sanballat the Hornite, Sanballat was a governor of Samaria. You remember Samaritans did not like the Jewish people. Samaritan had a gate around his city, the capital Samaria. Okay, and then when Tobiah was that's a Jewish name, so he probably was a Jewish, but he wasn't a good Jew, wasn't an Orthodox Jew. He probably had mixed marriages or didn't follow the customs or wherever it was. He might have been expelled from the community of the Jews, from Judah, from the southern part of Israel, Judah and Benjamin. And so he was, it says, Tobiah of Ammon, he's an Amorite of Ammon, okay? When he heard it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people. Well, this Tobias and Sanballat, these two, Tobias was wealthy, he was a governor. Sanballat was wealthy, he was a governor, a lot of influence. He was old at this time, but a lot of influence. They wanted to keep their knee on the neck of Israel. They wanted to keep them down. They didn't want them to prosper. They wanted them to suffer. They wanted them to be open and where enemies could attack them. They wanted them to remain poor. They wanted the city, the gates to be in ruins because they did not like them. If they got powerful, it would be a threat to them. It may affect their commerce. It may affect their safety. It may catch the eye of the king of Persia. He may start liking them better than them. And maybe the Sanballat and Tobiah had a little military might or threat against Israel. If they got that gate, that would go away. So, or maybe, which I think is, they just didn't like them. They wanted them to be in misery. They wanted them to be in misery. They were their enemy. They cared nothing about them. They didn't want anything good happening to them. That's what I believe. Okay. Now here's our passage. Okay, we're going pretty good. Got this setting good. We're doing great. So look what he says right here. So he makes it to Jerusalem. It took him It's about 1,100 miles from Persia to get to Jerusalem. So it took him quite a bit of time traveling by foot to get there. So it took him a long time. It took him months to get there. So in verse 11 it says, so I went to Jerusalem and I was there for 3 days. Okay? Those 3 days, what did he do? He probably rested from this long trip. He probably went to God in prayer again to find out what's going to be the strategy once I get here. What do I need to do? He was probably isolating himself so I can hear from God. And when you get ready to do a monumental task or something, you need to get away from God too. Not from God, excuse me. Away from people too, and be with God so you can hear from God clearly. Get some rest so you can hear from God. Don't try to hear from God when you're tired and wore out. Don't try to do so much. Get away. Jesus got away often, away from the people. Jesus got plenty of rest. Get rest so you can hear from God. So I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Look what he does here. Look at his strategy. Smart. This is a book of leadership. If you want to know about leadership, this is the book. Then I rose at night. He rose at night so people could not see him. He rose at night because what he's about to do was going to be in secret. People, a lot of times you may have the greatest plans, like Joseph found out. You may have a great dream. You may have a great vision. But that doesn't mean you share it with people. It may mean that you keep it to yourself for a while. Joseph learned that. Nehemiah knows that. So he knows what he's going to do. He knows what he's doing at night, but he's not going to tell anybody, because you tell the wrong people, they spread gossip. You tell the wrong people, they interpret the wrong way. You tell the wrong people, they may be against you. Okay? And you got to remember, Sanballat and Tobiah, they had spies inside the camp of Judah. They had strongholds on the noble people. Okay? Maybe through intermarriage, maybe through business dealings or whatever it was, but they had influence on the people of Judah, and so they would find out. So he doesn't want people to know. In fact, he wants to be the one that breaks the news to everybody at one time. That's what he wants. So he rose at night, and I and a few men, just took a few, doesn't need an entourage. He's on a search out mission to see what's out there, see the condition of the gates. That's what he's going to do. Doesn't need a lot of people. If he had a lot of people, it would attract a lot of attention. People would hear all the horses. People would hear men talking. But in just a few, he can go around there and nobody would know he was there. He'd be gone before they even knew anybody was there. So I had a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. As a leader, just because God lays it on your heart doesn't mean you got to tell everybody. Doesn't mean you got to tell anybody. Sometimes it means you don't tell anybody. You hold on to it until God gives you permission, or God lays it on your heart. This is the right time to tell the people. If you tell too soon, guess what? They'll spoil it for you. You tell too soon, they can launch an attack to thwart what God has called you to do. If you tell too soon, it can cause problems with you. A lot of times in leaders, we get excited about what God has called us to do, or God wants us to do, and we blab it out. And that gives Satan an opening for an attack. And that makes life much harder. And sometimes what God has called us to do doesn't even happen, or it takes a whole lot longer than it should. So he's smart. We can learn from him, okay? Sometimes it's best to be quiet until God says tell, which I can say it 100 times, okay? And I told no one what God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem, okay? There was no animal with me but the one I rode. So it wasn't going to be any noisy animals. It was just a horse that he was on. I went out by night by the valley gate, okay? It goes by these gates, okay? To the dragon spring and to the dung gate. And I inspected the walls of Jerusalem. So he went to the openings, looking at the condition of the gate to see, take an assessment of what needed to be done, how long it might take, how much manpower he needed, and how much timber he would need. They were broken down. Plus he wants to see if what his brother had told him was true. Probably worse than what his brother told him. And they were broken down, and his gates had been destroyed by fire, by Nebuchadnezzar. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal for me to pass. Then I went up into the night by the valley and inspected the wall. He's looking at the wall. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. They knew he had gone, but they didn't know what was going on. He kept it to himself. Only people who knew where he was those few men that was with him, and they really did not know what was going on. They saw what he was doing, but they did not know the plan, that his plan was to rebuild this. Because remember, they tried to rebuild it before, and they got thwarted. Remember that the enemy doesn't want them to do it. They had moved beyond it of getting that thing built, but now Nehemiah's mission is to get it built. So they don't know, but they will know. It says, so I returned, and the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, and had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, and the officials, and the rest who would do the work. He kept it to himself. Can you keep a secret? If God gives you something, can you keep it secret? That's what it comes down to. Can you keep a secret? I hope you can, because sometimes God gives you stuff that's just for you. That's not meant to tell anybody else. Can you keep a secret? I hope you can. I hope you can. Okay? Let's look at 17. Okay? Then I said to them, so he gathers all of them together. He gathers all the officials, the priests, the nobles, and the officials, and the rest who would do the work. So he gets a select group. Okay? These are the decision makers. These are the influencers. These are the ones who are going to do the work, or mastermind the work, or lay out the work. You're going to see later on it's families that's going to do the work, but these are the ones that's going to mastermind the work. Okay? These are the ones that have influence. These are the religious leaders. These are the people, the lead that the common folk look up to. If they say it's okay, they'll do that. He knows that. When you're a leader, you have to get buy-in from the leadership. A lot of people think, oh, the pastor, he has all the decisions. He can't do anything without leadership. And the leadership needs a godly leader like the pastor. Okay? And if those two are on one accord, you have peace and harmony, and the people that are underneath them will follow. But if you have the pastor or the leader and the leadership fighting or not getting along, it's rough. Neither one of them will survive. And you'll have chaos among the common people. And nothing will get done for God. None of his business will be taken care of. He will receive no glory, because Satan would have gone in and destroyed the harmony that was there, and will create a sense of divisiveness among the people. Okay? If you don't believe me, just look at the people and the 12 spies. Okay? Moses said, let's go. The leadership said no. The people believed the other people, the other 10 spies, and they spent 40 years in the wilderness. That's the consequence. Okay? All right? He says, you see the trouble that we're in? So he acknowledges what they see. We're in trouble. And the wall is so bad, it's undeniable that they're in trouble. That wall, that destroyed gate, destroyed wall, is not a representation of the God they serve. That wall, those gates are needing repair, that are burned down, that are in rubbles, opens them up to be attacked by the enemy. That wall, that gate, that shame there, it makes them look bad in front of the other nations. It's terrible. It's horrific. Okay? And it gives the impression that they are a country with no self-esteem and with a weak God. Okay? He said, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Okay? It's just sitting there. It's shameful. No country or nation should subject itself to do that. You know how bad it is. Come, let us build this wall of Jerusalem. He motivates them. He says, we're in a bad spot. Let's do this. Let's build this wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. Okay? Look bad. Look terrible. Be shameful in the eyes of others. See, when you have a church home, you have your church needs to be looking good all the time. It needs to be clean. It needs to be repaired regularly. It needs to be maintained. It needs to be looking good, because that's your representation of the God that you serve. The people that don't know God will look at your church, but they serve this God in a place like this, or this God doesn't even allow them to take care of this place. Why would I serve a God like that? So it can create a stumbling block. Look what he says. And I told them the hand of God that had been upon me for good. He told them what happened with him and the king, and how the hand of God softened the king's heart, and the king granted him permission to rebuild it. Not only granted permission to rebuild the wall, but gave him an army and the officers and the timber to do that. And he said that was from the hand of God. And they believed him. And also the words that the king had spoken to him. And they said, let us rise up and build. He motivated them and said, let's do this. God is with us. We can do this. We need it. They knew for a long time this needed to be done. They just didn't know how. They needed somebody to come from God to show them a way. And this was Nehemiah. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. So they got their hands ready to do some work, some hard work. Okay? But when Sanballat, that's that governor of Samaria, and the Horonite, and Tobiah the Ammonite, the governor of Ammon, and then Gresham, basically the high-ranking official or governor of Arabia, heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us. Now, you got to understand, when you're doing something for God, some people are not going to like it. They're not going to like it at all. And what they're going to do, they're going to jeer at you, make fun of you, try to humiliate you, try to discourage you, say you can't do it, you never will. They try to make up lies. They try to do all these things to discourage you. But Nehemiah shows us that if you're focused on God, if you know what God has done, he has laid this on your heart. He has put this burden on your heart. He has compelled you to do this cause, to feed these people, to do this, then nothing anybody can say will dissuade you. If people were easily dissuaded, we would not have the churches we would have the hospitals, we would not have the business we have. You gotta stay focused, and you gotta know what voice to listen to and what voice not to listen to. Nehemiah knows that right now. He's only listening to God's voice and those who are with him, and that's why he will be successful. And so you also got to look at who's the ones that's criticizing. These people never liked the Jews, never will, don't want to see them doing any good, and so they're naysayers. So look at who it's coming from, and then you'll know whether or not you should listen to them or not, and you'll know what their motive is. They jeered at them, made fun of them, they mocked them, despised them, said, what is this thing you're trying to do? You don't need to do this. You're just trying to be independent. You said, are you rebelling against the king? That's the argument that was made in Ezra chapter 4, verse 17. You're rebelling against the king. That time the king believed it. This time the king did not, because of the reputation of Nehemiah. Faithful cupbearer, hard worker, faithful worker, honest individual, loyal. It's based on the word of Nehemiah. And that reputation, that light, that blameless attitude, blameless lifestyle superseded anything any governors could say or do to persuade the king. What an amazing thing. Reputation so strong that they're going to believe the king is going to take your reputation over governors of nations and provinces. Okay? So are you rebelling against the king? See, they'll start doing lies and getting people scared and getting them worked up and trying to do rumors. Look what Nehemiah says. Then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper. Put it right back on God. God had given him this assignment. God had made a way. We have seen how God worked in this whole process. And the God of heaven, the God that I worship, not the God you worship, I worship the true and living God. The God that I worship will make us prosper. It may be difficult, but we will prosper. And we, his servants, look at his heart. He doesn't take any credit or anything. We his servants, that's the right perspective, will arise and build but you will have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. You will not have anything to do with Jerusalem. You will not be able to say anything. You will be kicked out. Okay? So God has told me he's going to be successful, and he believes him. When God is giving you something, it's laid on your heart, outreach, helping the needy, helping maybe women that are having children out of wedlock, helping women that are considering abortions, helping somebody get off drugs, helping whatever God has laid on your heart, giving to a cause, giving to a church, giving to an organization that helps the homeless, giving to an organization that helps community, wherever God has laid on your heart, do it. Don't listen to that voice over here and say, oh, it ain't worth it, somebody else. No. Whatever he's laid on your heart, do it, because God will make it prosper if he has given that to you. Well, I have enjoyed this lesson. This lesson, Nehemiah, I want to encourage you to read the rest of the book. Read the rest of it. See how Nehemiah stays focused. Look at his leadership. Look how he motivates. Look how he leans on God for wisdom. And that's what I get out of here. You know, it wasn't easy going before the king. You know, you ever had to say something, you take a deep breath and you pray, and God just that's what Nehemiah had to do. It was intimidating. Even though the king liked him and knew him well, he knew the king well, they weren't buddies. He was a king, he was a cupbearer. He was up here, he was down here. It was still intimidating, and Nehemiah still had to be on his best behavior, but he trusted God. And when he trusts God, God gave him the right words to say, touch the heart of the king, and everything else is history. So when you're faced with a dilemma that you want something, trust God. Ask God for the right words. Give God glory. Pray. Fast and pray. Take time to rest. Hear from God. Don't listen to the naysayers. Cut them off. Get away from them. Surround yourself around people who believe in what you're doing and who's going to help you. God bless you. I love you so much. I can't wait till we have this same time again next week. I hope you have a great Sunday. I hope you have a great Sunday school. I love you much. God bless you.